a consultant to the British government, which I will never be, I will say to Theresa May or Boris Johnson, release this Iranian tanker immediately and avoid trouble. Because if there is a war, it will be disastrous.
Well, thank you for setting out a position. Now I want to hear what the rest of you think about that, Stephanie.
I think that's a bit difficult, isn't it? Because the United Kingdom is still a member of the European Union, and the reason why they stopped the tanker, as far as I understand, in Gibraltar is because it was breaking sanctions on Syria. So how can the UK then say, because of a difficult situation in Iran, we just ignore what we have agreed with the Europeans?
Yeah, Stephanie, sanction against Syria, this is oil. This is going to Syrian people. We have 25 million Syrian people. So you want to deprive them completely from energy? They don't want them to fill their cars, actually tank with petrol?
But Barry, I mean, the fact is that, just to lay out the factual case, it is that they broke EU sanctions. I mean, I'm sure that there are deeper reasons, and someday the diplomatic cables will be released 30 years after we're all dead. And we'll find out. But you know, what Iran is particularly exercised about is that presumably they weren't just giving this oil to the Syrian people. The Syrian regime was paying for the oil. And the big problem, as you pointed out, is the sanctions prevent the sale of oil. And so, you know, they come back
sale of oil to whom? You know,
just sale of oil. And this is what's interesting. I mean, I think Stephanie was getting onto this. I mean, the EU has, and this week it's so interesting, in the 12 to 36 hours before this latest round of tit for tat, there was diplomatic activity in New York, and there was also reported activity in trying to figure out a workaround for these sanctions. Russia is very keen, and Russia is an important player in this story that we often ignore. You know, Russia was very keen in working with the European Union to find a new payment system that would allow the sale of oil, but that would avoid payment in dollars. But the Iranians also need dollars in order to maintain their economy. And all of this was under discussion, European Union, including Britain, and then this event happened.
Michael, why the Spanish government did not detain this ship? Why the Spanish government? This is part of European Union.
Barry, just hold on a minute.
Can I speak? Otherwise they think they're paying me for not speaking. I don't agree that I just don't believe that that our country and our foreign secretary and our government would be so assiduous about what the EU wants. We know what they think about the EU. The way they've treated the EU, it's nothing to do with the EU. I don't think they were conscious of that at all. This is to do with our special relationship with the United States, a dangerous special relationship, which now they have to grow very fast, like a plant in a greenhouse, you know, because there's no other option. I do think Barry, although he does it in his colourful way, I do think he has a point. That, you know, this idea of that you do this to a country which, you know, you kind of punish it, collectively punish it. And it started because Trump hated what Obama did. He hated Obama, so he did everything in his power to
You mean in relation to the nuclear deal that was negotiated in 2015?
He hates Obama. It started with a very personal thing. But the point remains that I'm astonished. The men who rule Iran are just as obnoxious, a lot, as the ones we're dealing with in the West. And I sort of was thinking, this is all about men. Horrible, non-negotiating, arrogant, self-important men who are going to take us into a war.
So, I mean, does anyone disagree with the gender point?
You know, I do disagree, because, you know, those men actually were highly accepted by the British government, the American government,
yeah,
European Union.
I'm not making that point.
And
I'm saying
they talk to them, and they actually talk to them, negotiate with them, and they struck a deal, you know, to contain Iranian nuclear activities.
So you say it's basically not a gender issue. I mean, very briefly dealing, Michael and Stephanie, just on the gender issue, let's just deal with that momentarily before we go back to anything else.
The gender issue? I think, it's funny, I kind of agree with Barry on this. I mean, the JCPOA was essentially...
The nuclear deal.
The nuclear deal was essentially because men are in charge. I don't know what input Angela Merkel had in those negotiations. Maybe Stephanie can tell us. But by and large, I think that there are gender issues particularly related to Iran, God knows, and also in the US and in the UK. But in this specific instance, I'm not sure that you can make the grand point you just made.
Well, let's.
Stephanie will tell us whether sisterhood is powerful or not.
The gender question also now a bit difficult in that context, but definitely, it's not so much about Angela Merkel, whether it's a gender question. It's just the nuclear deal is something that is seen in Germany as a massive achievement of years and years of negotiation. And of course, Germans want to protect it. And they're actually taking quite a risk in their relationship with the United States, which is already very difficult now. The Merkel-Trump relationship is very bad. And there's another challenge now there, which they have to manage.
On the point, the underlying point that Yasmin was making, Michael, about an American agenda, which the UK, in order to support its special relationship, kind of climbing off the fence in support of an American position on Iran. Do you see it like that?
Yeah, I do. I think that this is... What I thought was very interesting was during the course of the week, Donald Trump gave this extraordinary speech, this blatantly racist call to his core supporters, about sending these 4 congresswomen of color back to where they came from. The British press asked Boris Johnson, and they asked Jeremy Hunt, who's his alleged challenger to take over as Prime Minister, will you condemn Trump? And they both ducked the question. And of course, Jeremy Hunt is still the Foreign Secretary. And I inferred from what he was saying and the way he ducked, saying, I will criticize the president for this, that he is considering Britain's position in all this. Where do we stand? I think that, Yasmin is right on that front. And I do think that that Britain is already finding itself in that uncomfortable new ground that if Brexit goes through as expected, we're going to find ourselves in, where you either really get into the pocket of an American administration that I think a lot of people in this country probably, President, don't like. Even conservatives who are pro-Brexit probably have some questions about him. And I think that's where we're headed.
So on this practical question, an American coalition of the willing in the Gulf called Operation Sentinel, is that something that you think the UK will feel it has to join?
Well, I don't know. First of all,
yes.
Yasmin thinks it will.
We aren't at forming coalitions yet. Let's not jump too far ahead, Carrie. Even a month ago or 6 weeks ago,
it's not a war coalition.
It is
this
not
Operation Sentinel, by the way. Obviously, it's allegedly it claims to be by the Americans a coalition in order to improve security for shipping.
Well, what does that mean? The security links between the US and the UK go back into World War II. They have gone through all kinds of changes and evolutions. I don't see why that would change now. And the tensions that, John le Carré was very good at exploring in his fiction, I just don't see that will change. But insofar as racing towards some kind of violent